Welcome to the Mind, Heart, Gut podcast. I'm your host, Christian Borja. Here we go beyond the surface and dive into what truly means to live well. This is a space for conversation on holistic health, mindset, emotional clarity, and conscious living, all through the lens of the body's three powerful intelligence centers: the mind, the heart, and the gut. Whether you're here to reset, reflect, or reimagine what wellness looks like in your life, I'm glad you're here. So let's dive in. Welcome, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Today is actually April 1st, and that's what we're going to be diving into. As most of you probably know, that April 1st is also known as April Fool's Day. But why? Why is it known as April Fool's Day? We're going to dive in and we're going to break this down and we're going to go over the history, because I feel that this whole April's Fool's Day and whatnot actually has a lot of insight to everything that's been happening, everything that's been going down over about the last 600 years now. So, all right, if you didn't know, all right, our calendar was changed. Today, April 1st, is actually technically the new year in a lot of ancient and indigenous calendars. However, though, all right, the calendar was changed in, I believe, 1582. All right, now, it was changed by a person named Pope Gregory the 13th. All right, so he was obviously, Pope in the Catholic Church and whatnot. And the whole purpose, from what research I could find, was that they were having an issue with Easter lining up on a specific day. And the way that their calendar was called the Julian calendar, which was actually brought out by Julius Caesar. All right, so the Julian calendar, I believe it was used all the way from 45 BCE, again under Julius Caesar, during the Roman Empire. And so they had used this calendar all the way again up to about 1582, where Pope Gregory the 13th went ahead and had it changed. And again, the reason was because supposedly the calendar was not lining up with their Easter. And now, as you know, Easter was predominantly the only big holiday for the Catholic religion. And if you've done any diving into the Catholic religion and how they pretty much ran the world at that time, there's some interesting stuff. In my first initial podcast, I spoke about a little bit about my religious background and my views on it. I'm not going to get into that one today. Today, we just kind of want to lay the basis down of some truth and what had happened, which is going to really allow us to move forward and kind of understand where I'm coming from with all the things that I talk about. So, again, Easter was not lining up with the Julian calendar, so that was a problem. And my guess is that it was a problem because possibly people weren't believing it. If the day's changing all the time and these people don't really know what exact day or what really happened, people start to question stuff, right? I know that we've all been starting to question a lot of different things over the last couple of years. So, to me, this is kind of the foundation or the starting line of seeing how things were changed. And then it leaves this rabbit hole for why. Now, right, you can go look up online, look at Wikipedia, go do a Google search, ask ChatGPT, whatever you want. And it'll give you the basics of why things were changed. All right. Now, the other thing too is that you need to know about, for most ancient cultures, indigenous, civilizations, and people like the pagans and stuff like that, this was actually their new year today, right around April 1st, because it lined up with the Spring Equinox. It lines up with a rebirth of life. So when we literally look at things in a more, esoteric perspective, we know that within the world on this earth, new life springs up in spring, right? And it kind of ties in with the whole deal of Easter with, Jesus rising from the dead, all this. We have this rebirth. So, a rebirth to me would signify a new beginning, which would be a new year, right? So, now these things also connect with something we call the circadian rhythm, or the body's internal clock. All right, you can do some other research, and you can see, we continue to change the times on our clock. We spring forward an hour and we fall back an hour. And you can do some simple research, but there is a huge percent increase of deaths, mainly heart attacks, when we spring forward. And there is a small decrease in deaths, mainly heart attacks, when we fall back. Now, supposedly the spring forward and the fall back have to do with agricultural purposes, even though I know majority of us human beings don't quite see what the advantage is or the purpose is to that. So, just my personal opinion is obviously, a little bit of population control, a little bit of extra business to the pharmaceuticals, and just overall messes up our circadian rhythm, which puts stress on the body. That's why people get heart attacks. All right, it's an increase in stress. That 1 hour change significantly stresses out our body because it completely throws off our circadian rhythm. And I'll be talking more about the circadian rhythm and all that kind of stuff. However, though, if you're hearing new things, during the podcast that I talk about and stuff like that, I encourage you to take notes. Start doing some of your own research on these things. Don't take everything that I say as fact, Go ahead and start fact checking what I'm saying. Do your own research. All right. I'm just putting out some ideas and just, talking, because I like to talk and I like to talk about this stuff. So I really encourage you, if you really want to learn and you really want to, take control over your life and your knowledge, then you need to start researching through some of these things that you find interest in or resonate with you on your own, because that's what's going to really give you the power of your own knowledge. Allow me to maybe, set a small spark for you to start going down your own rabbit hole. All right, but overall, like I had mentioned, we had the Julian calendar from the Roman Empire, and then a French Pope Gregory the 13th, decided that we needed to change out of the Julian calendar into what we now call the Gregorian calendar, after Gregory. Right? That's all makes sense now. And there's lots of different calendars too out there. If you didn't know, there's lots of different calendars. There's probably about 2 other calendars, maybe 3 other calendars that are still in use today. All right. There's the Chinese calendar. Obviously, they have their new year a little bit past us. And then we also have the Jewish calendar. However, though, I would probably say that most of the things really line up and really happen with the Jewish calendar. So if you're going to go look at calendars, I'd really suggest you start looking up that calendar and then look at history. This is a wild thing. It's going to take you a little bit of time. But look at the Jewish calendar and then look at history events that happened. Most of the not so good history events, like, if people died or there were major accidents or anything like that, look up those events and see if they find any correlation to the Jewish calendar. Again, just, lighting a spark, giving you an opportunity to dive down a different rabbit hole. There's some interesting stuff that I found going down that rabbit hole. All right, so overall, the purpose was, again, to be able to get the calendar to line up with Easter. So basically, they changed up the calendar so it could support Easter for the Catholic religion. All right. Overall, though, the science behind it, all right, they say that a calendar year is pretty much goes by the solar year, which is about 365.2422 days. All right, now that only leaves about a small difference of about 11 minutes per year. However, all right, that 11 minutes per year continued to supposedly drift the days further and further away from the actual date that they said that everything went down for Easter. All right. Not only that, they also were saying that it was drifting further and further away a little bit from the seasons and the equinoxes. Now, the equinoxes are an important part to take note of, all right, because if we think back in history, if you've watched any history movies, back around these times, you know that there was more than just the Catholics, all right? There were a few different I would say, Christian following religions, right? We had, people like the Protestants, we had Orthodox, but we also had pagans. And if you guys ever watched the Vikings show or any of those, older ones of that time in history, you obviously know about the pagans. Now, the pagans were a lot more rooted in the earth, connecting to nature and going off of astrology based off of what the stars were saying, the moon cycles, and the sun cycles. All right, so everything was extremely connected to nature and the earth and the way that the earth functions. Um, and we actually still practice a lot of pagan traditions today, like a Christmas tree. Christmas tree and decorating the Christmas tree is 100% a pagan practice. However, if you watch something like the Vikings, the way that they presented that time on Earth was that the Catholics wanted to destroy the pagans from the face of the earth, and they did not want anyone to know anything about them, and they wanted them to be forgotten, which was kind of like one of the most disrespectful things back then. Especially, I mean, they were at war, so like they were both, they both wanted to wipe each other off the face of the earth, and that's kind of what they were portraying in these movies. I don't actually know what really went down because I wasn't, you know, my mind right now was not there at that point in time, so I don't know what had happened. However, though, just from today and how much shit people talk about the pagan religion and how little they know, and then how much, things like Christianity or, Judaism and stuff like that have really taken over and kind of been the main religions, in our day today. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of those. Again, I don't have any opinion of right or wrong for which you to believe in. That is up to you. And whatever you want to believe in is totally fine. As long as it makes sense to you and it makes you happy. Your life is your life. So I always say, you do you, boo, right? Doesn't matter anything to me. I'm living my own life. I'm worried about myself. However, though, I think that this information is fascinating and allows us to really, start to think a little bit deeper and gain a bigger and clearer perspective of what's really going on in our world today and some different options on how we want to live our life. You know, what do we want to believe in? How do we want to live our life? What do we believe is true? What do we believe is false? All these things. And it's really just up to you, to be able to make those decisions for yourself. It's not really up to us to try to influence anyone else. We just talk about the things that we're interested in, and the people that resonates with us will be drawn to us. All right, so don't go around. One thing that I really am not a fan of about most religions, especially Christianity, they're all like, you're gonna go to hell if you don't ask Jesus into your heart, and they push, 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 push. So, if any of you are, go to church and you call yourself a Christian, that's totally fine. And you can let people know that, your practices make you really happy. And if someone resonates with that, then they'll say, hey, I want to learn more. And then that's a time that I feel that is appropriate to like start talking to people, start talking about Bible verses and maybe invite them to your church. I think overall, church and religions, they can lay a good foundation down of morals and values for yourself to live by. However, though, my biggest thing is the judgment. And if you listen to my first podcast explaining my life and stuff like that, I dealt with a lot of that judgment. Going to, I went to a private Christian school when I was growing up, from preschool all the way up until about sixth grade-ish, and I dealt with a lot of negative stuff from the people, the families, my friends' parents, and stuff like that. At a certain point in my life, my parents were going through a divorce, and all this stuff was happening, and I didn't get any love at that point. So I became really angry in that sense. Since then, I've been able to get over it, and I understand people are people. However, though, if you're going to be, you know, putting yourself on a pedestal because of something you believe in over other people, this is where it gets fucked up. We're all human. No matter what you believe in, that doesn't make you better than anyone else, right? So that's the important thing to think about. So, anyways, I just wanted to come on here today and talk about this because I don't feel that a lot of people quite know that the reason why we call April 1st April Fools, or why some people call it, is because they changed the calendar on us. And then that term April Fools came to play, they started calling everyone a fool who did not respect the new calendar of the Catholic Church. And so they deemed everyone as a fool that didn't want to change. And so they would pull pranks and they would call them names and all these different things. And, it was unfortunate. But yeah, so I encourage you, do some research, dive a little bit deeper into this if it resonates with you, and, come to your own conclusions. But my conclusion, I'm going to tell you Happy New Year, Happy Spring, and let's focus in on bringing some new positive life into this new year, into this new season, and let's continue to grow, feel the love, and continue to just move forward. All right, we'll see you in the next podcast. Bye.